Welcome to A Seeking Heart with Allison Gingras, a podcast about living your Catholic faith in the everyday ordinary, especially through encountering God through good Catholic books, good non-fiction and fiction books, adult, and today we're going to talk about children's books, young. I don't know, Kimberly, what category would you put this book in?
Middle grade readers.
Thank you. I knew there was like a perfect place, a perfect way of explaining that. We're going to be talking with the author of A Hermitage of Her Own, my very good friend. And I say that, I know I say that every time I introduce somebody, but this person and I actually shared a hotel room for almost a week. So we're totally good friends. Kimberly Cook, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Allison. Always happy to be here.
I love like all the things that you do. So instead of me trying to remember them all, can you just give us a quick rundown on who Kimberly Cook is?
Sure. Well, I guess basically the key things that I guess people would know me for is my book, Motherhood Redeemed, that was put out with Tan Books, and that is on radical feminism and motherhood and how radical feminism has affected people's ability or lack of ability to embrace motherhood in our culture. And then also my podcast is The Dignity of Women, which really looks at issues with women in the church. And that could be anything from testimonies, how God's worked through different people's lives, to, eating disorders, sex trafficking, you name it, like so many different ways that the church has helped women to spiritually thrive, grow, and be free in their faith and in their lives. So those are the basic things that I had done. And now I started a trilogy for middle grade girls. And you mentioned the first one in the trilogy is A Hermitage of Her Own. So this series is called The Adventures at Lily Creek.
And this is out from Full Quiver Publishing, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is the volume 1 the only one out so far? When can we expect the other?
So far, yes. And it's funny because when that one came out, I kind of, when you're doing things on your own, you just kind of are like, oh, I can get the second one out whenever I want to. And my goal is kind of by Christmas, but I have had the sweetest emails coming through from 8 and 9-year-old girls being like, can you please write this any faster? Like, I love this book. I've read it a bunch of times and I really need to know what's going to happen next. And I've had a few moms tell me that their daughters started crying when they found out that there were no more yet written in the series. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure right now from these like middle grade readers because I was like, oh, I'm on my own time. I'm just doing my own thing here. But now I feel like there's a lot of pressure to get the next two done. So hopefully by Christmas, I'll have the second one. It's going to be a summer project.
I so can relate to that. I love and hate when I discover a new author or a new series and I'm just discovering it at the beginning, or even that happens when I like discover a new TV show. Like I want to be able to binge the whole thing.
Yep.
Our society has ruined me for waiting.
It's true. Yeah, that actually happened with my husband and I with The Passion. We found out about it when it was just a crowd starter, when they were first starting and like collecting, or not The Passion, The Chosen. The Chosen. Yeah. So they were doing the crowdfund, and my husband found it and he's like, this looks like it's going to be really good. Like, I think we should donate. And we actually donated to them in the very beginning before they even started it. And, they sent us the pilot episode. Everybody who donated was sent a CD of the pilot episode before anyone else saw it. And we were like, oh, this is good. But then it was like, well, when's the next one coming out? Right? It's like, well, who knows, like a year from now. And so, it started, the first season came out, everybody was crazy about, started getting on board with The Chosen. And then it was like, another year till the next season came out. And it's like people that are just now discovering it, they're like, I just found this show, The Chosen. And I'm like, oh, like I wish I had found it now so I could just binge watch it instead of having to agonizingly wait for every episode or every season.
So this is so pathetic. I actually got to preview season 3, the first 2 that were going to be out in theaters. I got to preview those, and then I said I'm not watching any more until I can watch all of them at once. So this is my Holy Week, which is as we're recording, we're about to go into Holy Week. That's going to be my Holy Week. Kind of meditation, and my devotion will be spending the week watching The Chosen. But we're here to talk
Oh my
today.
gosh. Yes.
I could
I
talk
can't believe
about
you haven't seen. They're so good. They're so good. The ones coming
that's
out.
what I heard. That's what I heard. I heard they're very
Oh, you have such
emotional.
a treat.
Yes.
Yeah, you have such a good thing to look forward to.
So I was like, I knew I couldn't watch anymore without the next one ready to queue right up, because this is just my personality. But speaking of things that we're waiting for, let's talk about the first book then in this series, a hermitage. I don't want to keep on to say heritage, a hermitage of her own. Tell us a little bit about this book.
Okay. Well, this book, again, is such a work of the Holy Spirit. I felt after I had done the nonfiction, Motherhood Redeemed, I felt that one thing that was really missing in literature were good books for middle grade readers. So you have the Anne of Green Gables, the Laura Ingalls, and all of kind of those classics in that genre. And everyone loves them. All the girls in that age group read them over and over again, but there's really nothing new. It's all the old stuff, And one thing that my daughter started to do was she would say, was Anne Catholic? And I was like, well, no, she was Christian. They were a Protestant. And then, was Laura Catholic? Well, no, they were kind of like an evangelical. And she started asking me all of these kind of heroines in literature. Were they Catholic? And again and again, I said, well, they were good Christians, and but none of them were Catholic. You always hear with these different stories, the preacher is married and has kids, and the church house and all these other kind of things. And she was always kind of searching for the Catholic heroine in any of these stories. And anything that we read that was specifically Catholic almost didn't grab their attention as much. It was almost like it wasn't as good of literature as the other ones. It didn't challenge them. It was almost just a cute little Catholic story or a story about a saint, and they had heard so many of those before. It was that she wanted some kind of an adventure, a character with adventure that got into mischief, that was the same kind of like Huckleberry Finn meets Anne of Green Gables meets, but the person would be Catholic. And I said, geez, that doesn't really exist. I'm racking my brain for any kind of character that is out there in any literature, that really has that. And I said, that is really missing from all of literature. And I felt really called to write that character, to create that character, especially for my daughter, and I thought, well, even if it's just for her. And so I started getting this inspiration for these 2 girls who are in Front Royal, Virginia, which is really close to where I live, in the Shenandoah, which I think is the most beautiful place in the world. And they find this chapel in the woods, this like abandoned chapel by 100 years or more. And it's falling into decay, but there's still an altar there, and there's a crucifix. And, it's clear that this was a Catholic chapel. So they have these adventures, and there's all kinds of funny things that happen to them. And, it follows along this path. But one of the things that happens is that the main character starts to struggle with her conscience. If this was a Catholic chapel, nobody knows about it. If this altar was used to consecrate the Eucharist, should this be told to somebody else? We're kind of using this as our secret fort, our hideout. We're having a great time. Wow. And we don't want to share this with anyone, but is this something that somebody should know about? And so that's kind of the struggle through the book. And her faith is something that continues to be challenged and will continue to be challenged as the series go, because she's the only Catholic in her community. So she's in a kind of Bible Belt area. She goes to a Protestant school. She's the only Catholic, and all of her friends, therefore, are, evangelical or Protestant or some kind of form of non-Catholic. And so right now in the first book, it's kind of innocent because they're young. They're not as concerned about faith. They're kind of just developing their faith. But it does start a little bit, and it's going to continue as they get older, where there's going to be challenges between the friends and between their faith and what it really means to them. And especially with the main character being so surrounded by non-Catholics, she's going to really have to question her own faith and where she stands with that. So it is a historical fiction. And the way that happened is, again, the Holy Spirit, because I wanted this to be as accurate as possible. So I called the Diocese of Arlington, where I am, and I said, I talked to a priest there, and I said, what would happen, fictionally, obviously, but what would happen if somebody found a chapel, like an altar that had been used for the Eucharist at one point in time? What would the diocese do with that? And he's like, it's so funny that you reach out now, because if you would have reached out a few months ago, I would have said, I have no idea what we would do, But he said, actually, this is in real time right now. This is happening in Stafford, Virginia,
crazy.
Not far from us. There is, we found there's this Catholic family that settled in Virginia. They had hundreds of acres, and deep in the woods, they had a chapel. And Catholicism was illegal in Virginia to practice. So they would have circuit riders, which are priests that would come on horseback every so often, and they would ride around and stop at the different secret places that they knew Catholics would gather. And they would kind of secretly spread the word to other Catholics that the priest is going to be here at this time, come at night, and all the sacraments that need to be performed, baptisms and marriages and communions and everything,
so cool,
will be performed. So this was, the diocese is right now deciding what to do with this information that they're actually, they've excavated and they're figuring this out. And he's like, did you not know about this? And I said, no. And he said, that's amazing. So I was able to talk to the forensics department of the diocese and work on this in real time with them. And now people keep asking, what are you going to do with the second book? And it's like, well, I'm seeing what the diocese does with, as they do it. I'm kind of like playing off reality,
That's
of
amazing.
what they're doing.
That's one of my favorite things about historical fiction. It's the only biblical and historical fiction is the only fiction that I read. I don't know why. I was just kind of I have a degree in English, so maybe I just burnt myself out with regular novels. But I love that little bit of history, that little bit of connection to the world. What's the time frame that the book is happening in?
So the book is happening in the 80s. So right now they're kind of in the early 80s. And the reason that I wanted to do that was I wanted to make it modern, but I also wanted to make it before cell phones and computer, before everyone had a cell phone and everyone had, computer access. And so it's kind of like modern, but not so modern that it's like, well, why didn't the person just pick up their cell phone? Or why didn't they just, it's before that time. So it's like as modern as it could be without having everyone having cell phones and computers and all of the technology that we have now. I wanted to put it right before that. So I started it in, early 80s.
So what is kind of your hope of like where the trajectory of the story will go? If you, I don't write fiction and I barely read it, so I'm always fascinated by the whole process of writing a fiction book, of creating characters. Like, do you like have it kind of planned out where you're going to go with it, or are you? Obviously, you're always open to the Holy Spirit, or is it like, well, I finished this one and now I'll wait for the Holy Spirit to guide? You gave us a little bit of insight of what will happen, but can you tell us a little bit more about that whole process?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely, when I started the sketch in my mind of what this book was going to look like. I really saw the whole trajectory of the series, the 3 books, the trilogy. I really saw pieces of how it was going to end. So obviously all the blanks aren't filled in, but I had a rough sketch of where the story was going to go and how it's going to end for certain characters, and some of the drama that's going to take place in between other characters, and the character development. So those things were already in my mind from the beginning. And again, I wanted that strong female Catholic heroine, and and the kind of girl that that middle grade reader could relate to,
Mm-hmm.
and that she would be real. She wants adventure, she wants fun, she gets into mischief, but she also has a really good conscience, and she's trying to figure out her faith, just like most girls that age are trying to figure out,
Yeah.
first of all, where they fit in, also their body issues, as far as like, am I pretty, or compared to these other girls, how come I'm like this? Or, I feel like
Right.
every girl goes through that process when they're in
I,
that middle school age range, coming into high school. And then, of course, boys start to come onto the scene, and you become self-conscious about boys. And so there's so much that is going on in a young girl's life, as far as figuring out, like, where is her value, where is her worth, where is her beauty. And I don't think any young girl really feels beautiful, no matter if she is or isn't, but
right.
you always focus on the worst things about yourself, the negative features, or I'm not this enough, or I'm not that enough, or I wish I had this, or I wish I had that. It's the old classic straight hair once curly and curly hair once straight kind of thing. But I think a
Yep.
lot of that is in our culture too, where we're always told that we're not good enough and we need to perfect, and we're not beautiful enough, or we're not whatever enough. And so that is something that I felt like really needed to play into this, where it's these characters are struggling just like any other girl would be struggling, but where are they going to find their self-worth, and where is the faith going to come into this, and understanding who they are in the light of being a daughter of the Lord, kind of a thing. And that's something that you don't see in literature a lot. You even with Anne, Anne of Green Gables, she always struggled with having red hair. It was so ugly. It was just a hard thing. And Laura Ingalls, she was so short, and half pint. She was smaller than the other girls. And so there's certain aspects of some of these things where you see that, but then it's never really resolved, especially from a faith perspective for these girls. They just kind of learn to embrace it, I guess you would say. And so I wanted to really address that from a faith perspective, because again, that's something that's not
Yeah.
seen. So I think that's one of the important messages throughout the whole story, is who you are as a daughter of God, and where your beauty and self-worth lie.
Having the privilege of having read this and reclaiming motherhood, I really see like this really great opportunity for mothers and daughters to kind of answer those questions, or not really answer, but maybe attack. What's the word looking for? Discuss. Just go very simply, Allison. Discuss all of those different things that you were just speaking about that we all face, because even when we get to adulthood, motherhood, we still face a lot of those same insecurities and doubts. And I think, if the mom's reading Reclaiming Motherhood and the child is reading The Adventures at Lily Creek, this first book, A Heritage. Why do I keep saying that? Hermitage. I'm so sorry. A hermitage. I'm looking right at the word, and yet still a hermitage of her own. Like I love when books give us a doorway into discussion, because there's some really tough discussions that we need to have with our children, and sometimes we just as moms don't know where to enter into them. But literature is just, it's always been this door, and it's one of my favorite doors, and I'm so happy that that you've given this opportunity to mothers and I'm excited you've given this opportunity to middle grade readers because they seriously need this. So Kim, unfortunately, we come to our end of our time with you, and I'm want to make sure people know where to find you and where to find this wonderful book, uh, Hermitage. I said it ever wrong.
Yes. Well, they can find it at my website, kimberlycook.me. And also it's available on Amazon and at Full Quiver on their website as well. And I will tell you quickly that A Hermitage of Her Own comes from Saint Rose of Lima. So that's a nod. She actually had her own hermitage in her backyard. So
I love
she
that.
actually created a hermitage of her own. And when I heard that, I was like, I love that. So that's why I named it after, because they found this little kind of hermitage of their own, this little space.
I love all those connections, and I encourage. One of the things I've also discovered as we wrap this up is that person who struggles to find time to read fiction. I love reading young adult and middle grade and even younger fiction with my plus it also, as a mom, if I've read it, then I have this great opportunity to have this discussion with my child. And I used to read out loud to my kids even when they were older. They still love it. Third grade, fourth grade, seventh grade, they're like, can you just read? I'm like, yes. So really excited that you're offering, that you've been able to bring this to fruition. I know this has been on your heart for a while, and it's exciting to see it finally out there. Again, we've been talking with Kimberly Cook. I'll have all the links to all the things, as I always do, in the show notes. The Adventures at Lily Creek, Volume 1, a oh my gosh, I give up. A hermitage, hermitage of her own. Everyone's going to look it up because Allison couldn't pronounce
There
it.
you go.
Kimberly, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thanks so much, Allison. It's been a gift.
You have been listening to A Sticking Heart